So we're going to have a look at Nehemiah and the story of that. Just for those of you that weren't here, the background was 500 years before Christ. Nehemiah sits in this predicament where his gates, the city where his father grew up, is lying in ruins, and his heart is broken because of the gates and the walls are broken down, and his heart is broken by this. So, and he works for the Persian king Artaxerxes, and Nehemiah was the cupbearer to this king, and the cupbearer would drink the drink or whatever that might be, wine or whatever, and eat the food prior to the king eating. So why was that? So that if he died, then the king wouldn't, obviously, in case someone was trying to poison him. Now, one of the interesting things is Artaxerxes' father was murdered by one of his trusted servants. So do you understand how this king really put a lot of trust in Nehemiah, and it was an incredibly important role, okay, that he played. And he trusted Nehemiah. And he would not have ever wanted Nehemiah to not be in that position, because he knew he could trust him, because he was a faithful servant. So let's have a look at his life and the situation here. We read in Nehemiah 2 verse 1 to 10. So it's called to turn vision into action. That is my title. So we read in verse 1. In the month of Nisan, which is April, in the 20th year of King Artaxerxes, when wine was brought for him, I took the wine and gave it to the king. I had not been sad in his presence before. So the king asked me, why does your face look so sad when you are not ill? This can be nothing but sadness of heart. So he comes in his presence, and he's never seen him sad. Never. Okay? And he says there, I was very afraid, but I said to the king, why do you think he was afraid? Do you know that you were not allowed to come into the presence of the king sad? That you could be put to death if you came into the king sad. Why do you think he was afraid? Because of that. He knew that he could be put to death. You do not come into the presence. You are upbeat every single time you come into his presence. And another thing is, you never speak to the king unless you've spoken to. Never. That is just not protocol. And if you do, you can lose your head. So it says then, verse 3, but I said to the king, may the king live forever. Why should my face not look sad when the city where my father was buried lies in ruins, and its gates have been destroyed by fire? The king said to me, what is it you want? Then I prayed to the God of heaven. When did he pray? Right then and there. And I answered the king, if it pleases the king, and if your servant has found favor in his sight, let him send me to the city of Judah where my fathers are buried, so I can rebuild it. Then the king, with the queen sitting beside him, asked him, how long will your journey take? And when will you get back? It pleased the king to send me, so I set a time. I also said to him, if it pleases the king, may I also, this is bold, let me tell you, may I have a letter to the governor of Trans-Euphrates so that they will provide me safe conduct until I arrive in Judah. And may I have a letter to Asaph, keeper of the king's forest, so that he will give me timber to make beams for the gates of the citadel by the temple, and for the city wall, and for the residence I will occupy. And because the gracious hand of God was upon me, the king granted my request. Because of what? The gracious hand of God was upon me, the king granted my request. Verse 9. So I went to the governor of Trans-Euphrates and gave them the king's letter. The king had also sent army officers and cavalry with me. Incredible, hey? When Sanballat and Horonite, Tobiah, the Ammonite official, heard about this, they were very much disturbed that someone had come to promote the welfare of the Israelites. So let's have a look at this incredible passage and break it up for our situation. And this is very fitting for you guys. Now you have a vision. I'm sure you have a vision. But unless you action plan it, it's never going to happen. So now what is going to be, how are you going to put this into action? Point 1, be time conscious when to move. And I think this is one of the hardest things for anyone, especially for me, to get a hold of. It says here, Nehemiah 2 verse 1, in the month of Nisan, which is in April, okay? But if you look in in Nehemiah 1 verse 11, last week we had a look there. Kislev is December. So from December, this was on his heart, and it was 4 months before he went into the presence of the king said. It was not just a willy-nilly boom. No, he spent 4 months in prayer. And when he felt the time was right, he goes into the presence of the king. And he goes into the presence of the king with a burdened heart of sadness. And the king picks that up and sees it. And he says, this must be a sadness of heart. So he didn't just move, oh, well, this has happened, boom, and he goes into, he did not do that. He saturated his situation in prayer. And he moved when the time was right. How many times have you moved when the time was not right and it's flopped? I think many of us run ahead of God and unfortunately don't saturate our situation in prayer, that when the time is right, we're not even aware of it. So I want to encourage you, make sure that you saturate your situation in lots of prayer, that when you move in the strength and the blessing, and it's the right time. And it is prayer not just prepared the soil of your heart, but those around you and those that you're going to confront. Number 2, be wise in your approach. Be wise in the way that you implement your action plan. Verse 2 to 3, Nehemiah 2, verse 2 to 3. So the king asked me, why does your face look so sad when you're not ill? He saw that you're not sick. What's going on? This can be nothing but sadness of heart. I was very much afraid. And like I said, why? Because he knew he could be killed. But I said to the king, may the king live forever. What an incredible way of addressing the king. He does it with absolute humility and honor. So much so that it's almost like he's buttering him up. But he used tremendous wisdom. Why should my face... And so he puts a question, almost putting the king in his position. He says, why should my face not look sad when the city where my fathers are buried lies in ruin and its gates have been destroyed by fire? So he puts it in a way of almost putting the king in his situation. Wouldn't you be sad if you were in my position? And he's very wise because the way he puts it to him, he addresses him. Now switch it, because you don't, in your situation, maybe it's your boss that you have to address, or if it's not, then it's God that you're addressing. But some of you might be in a work situation. Who of you have had, let's say you're a boss, who of you have had guys come to you and make a request to you? I think all of us. Who of you have had them come and show tremendous honor when they ask? How many times have you had it that they come to you and you look at this and you think, but you're just lying to me? Come on. And 90%, maybe even more, they approach you with this honor that's maybe a bit false sometimes, but they lie to you, and you know this is not truthful. And what does that do to your heart as the boss? It frustrates you. And it doesn't want, it causes a blockage in your heart. Because there's been no prayer from their side, and you know this is not honest. But here, this had never ever happened to the king. The king trusted Nehemiah. And so when he came and it was saturated with prayer, he knew this was the truth. Because he had trusted him. Yet so often, you have those that work for you come to you and you know, this is just a lie. I mean, how many times have I had, oh, please loan me money, this one's died. And I look at them and they say, my brother's died. And I say, has he really died? Or are you lying to me? How sad is it that we have to say that to people? Who of you have done that? Come on. I know you guys have done the same. And I find it sad that people will even use that instead of just being straight up and honest. But he comes to the king with absolute humility and he makes his request known, puts the king in his situation. Success comes when 1,000 hours of preparation meets one moment of opportunity. And I can tell you, he would have prayed about this, and it would have churned in his heart and in his mind numerous times how this would play out before the king. And it would have played out numerous, maybe not 1,000 times, but when that moment came where the king said to him, what on earth is going on with you? The door opened for him to answer and speak. And he was ready. And I can tell you now, God was leading him. Number 3, be prayerful at all times through the process. Nehemiah 2 verse 4. Listen to this. The king said to me, what is it you want? Look what it said straight after that. Then I prayed to the God of heaven. Do you think he then got on his knees and prayed quickly? Come on, the situation. Tell me what's the situation. In his mind, he said, oh Lord, help me. Give me wisdom now. Isn't it? He didn't pray. There's no ways he would have prayed in front of the king. No ways. In his heart, he prayed and said, Lord, help me. And every single one of us, when we find ourselves, no matter what situation, may we say, Lord, help me in this situation. Give me wisdom. I don't know what to do here. Whatever the situation, may we, even once this has been rehearsed 1,000 times, that your heart is ready for this. And even if your heart, you still say, Lord, do you see the complete and total vulnerability and dependence that Nehemiah had on God? I find that such a blessing. And may we be the same, that we cry out to God in every situation, in every circumstance, even though we might have gone through a situation numerous times before we make the request. Number 4, be bold, clear, and honest. Don't lie. Be straight and honest, because then you have the blessing of God. Nehemiah 2 verse 5 to 6 said, and I answered the king, if it pleases the king, and if your servant has found favor in his sight, let him send me to the city of Judah where my fathers are buried, so that I can rebuild it. If you trust me, and I've served you well, would you please be so kind as to send me and restore my situation? Help me to restore my situation. Then the king, with the queen sitting beside him, asked me, how long will your journey take, and when will you get back? It pleased the king to send me, so I set a time. And the king says, that's a tough one. I trust you implicitly with my life. You're my cupbearer. But because you're an honest, upright man, I want to help you. I want to serve you in this regard. And he says, but tell me, how long is this going to be? And he doesn't spin a story. He tells him, obviously, I think it will take this long, this long. So he was not abusive. And sadly, when we're abusive, what happens? the favor of God will be removed. So may we make sure that we are honest and upright and at all times truthful. Number 5, be courageous and ask for help. And I think that is the toughest one for all of us, is to ask for help. Listen, can you help me in this situation? To what extent can you assist me in this regard? Verse 7 to 8 says there, I also said to him, if it pleases the king, may I have letters to the governor of Trans-Euphrates so that they will provide me safe conduct until I arrive in Judea. You didn't just travel there. They will take you out. So here he says, please, will you write me a letter that I have permission to go this way? Verse 8, and may I have a letter to Asaph, keeper of the king's forest, so that he would, this is tremendous boldness, so that he will give me timber to make beams for the gates of the citadel, by the temple, and for the city wall, and for the residence I will occupy. And then he goes a step further, and he's courageous, because now God has opened it, and he goes and he says, will you even be so kind as to allow me to get timber, so that I can do this? Who's going to do that to someone that is unfaithful to them? Who of you will do that for someone that's very highly faithful? Different story. And here the king grants him that request. Why? Because he had a good reputation. He was a godly man. He was a trustful, honest, upright man. And so he got his request granted just like that. Number 6, be aware and acknowledge God's blessing. It says in verse 8 to 9, and because the gracious hand of God was upon me, not because I was eloquent and I had planned things, no, because of the gracious hand of God that was upon me, the king granted my request. And may you always know that any blessing that comes from God, any in your life comes from God, no matter what it is. No matter what it is. Even if it comes through this person or that person, ultimately it comes from the grace of God. It is the blessing and the favor of God. So I went to the governor of Trans-Euphrates and gave them the king's letter. The king had also sent army officers, and cavalry with me. Wow. He even sent an entourage to give him safe passage. Wow. So the king went even over and above what he had asked. That is God's blessing, hey? But do you see what Nehemiah did? He said, because the gracious hand of God was upon me. Not because I'm so clever in asking. No, there was no arrogance. The whole time it was because of God. It was God's blessing. It was God's favor. You and I are in our situation because God has blessed us. And any door that opens, it is because of the favor and the blessing of God in our life. Oh yeah, I did say it to you, so let me just say it. Like I said, his father had been poisoned by one of his trusted officials. And look here, we read in Ezra 4, verse 19 to 21. I issued an order, and a search was made, and it was found that this city had a long history of revolt against kings, and had been a place of rebellion and sedition. Jerusalem has had powerful kings ruling over the whole of Trans-Euphrates, and taxes, tributes, and duties were paid to them. Now issue an order to those men to stop work so that the city will not be rebuilt until I show order. What had happened was the king said, the walls will not be rebuilt. He decreed that. And what Nehemiah then goes and does is he goes and requests the very thing that the king had said, I'm not going to allow. I'm not going to grant. So what was the possibility of this being allowed? So it made it even so much greater when He asked and it was granted, because he was saying, would you reverse your decree? Incredible, eh? And here God touches his heart. We read in Proverbs 21 verse 1 says, the king's heart is in the hands of the Lord. He directs it like a water course wherever he pleases. And he changed the king's heart to say, yes, I will grant you that. I will give you the timber. I will give you safe passage. How amazing is that? I'll read it again. The king's heart is in the hands of the Lord. And we should maybe look at praying and say, Lord, would you change our government's heart? That this looting and theft and destroying of this nation will stop. Would you change this? And I want to encourage you, let's begin to pray that the King of Kings would change our nation's governing officials' hearts, because they are purposefully destroying this nation. Number 7, be sure that you will have opposition to your vision, 100%. You will always have opposition. And I think especially those that serve God will have even greater opposition, because Satan does not want you to flourish. Nehemiah 2:10 says, when Sanballat and Horonite and Tobiah, the Amorite officials, heard about this, they were very much disturbed that someone had come to promote the welfare of the Israelites. Why? They did not want the advancement of Jewish welfare at all. They were anti it. The Jews lived in disgrace and without protection, because they didn't have walls, they didn't have a gate. And so what these guys did is they resorted to taunting them and insulting them and humiliating them and mocking them to try and deter them from carrying on and building. But you need to know you're going to have that in life. People are going to say, no, that's never going to work, or this is not going to work, or don't do that, and this is going to fail. You need to know if this is the right thing, you would go for it. Why? Because you can say with all your might, the God of heaven will give me success. If you know this is the vision that God has placed on your heart, you say, the God of heaven will give me success. No matter how you insulted, no matter what opposition may come your way, you run with all your might. Be strong and courageous and go and fulfill it. Number 8, be well planned and prepared, because those who fail to plan to fail. We need to know that. And many of us sadly do not plan, and hence we fail. So here's a couple of pointers. Nehemiah was well planned. He saturated his vision in prayer. He was sad in the king's presence so that he was given an opportunity to speak to him. Otherwise, he could not speak to him. Number 3, he requested the kings to leave his service in order to rebuild the wall. He made an honest, upright request. He calculated clearly how long the vision would take to accomplish. He worked out the requirements and things he would need to complete the project. He ensured that he had the necessary insurance. In other words, the safe passage, otherwise he would not have got to his destination. Number 7, he boldly asked for financial support to fulfill his project or his vision. He promoted, trained, and equipped people to help with the project. And then what did he do? He got off his butt and he did something about it. He got going. Number 9, be ready to start when you have the green light. The minute God gives you the green light, run. In whatever it is. When you feel the time is right, run. Listen to what Chuck Swindoll says. I am wary of people who call it faith when they can't tell you their plans. Have you ever heard an individual say, no, we're not going to think this through. We're just going to have faith. God will lead us. The calculating businessman says, yeah, you'll be back needing more bucks before you're halfway there. The presence of faith does not mean an absence of organization. Hello? Unfortunately, I've seen that truth so many times. Some enter the ministry with enthusiasm but later drop out because they have not considered the cost. Swindle goes on and he says, the most disillusioned people I know are those in the Lord's work who are paying the price of not thinking through their plans. And that can be in your industry. Make sure that you plan so that you make sure that you do not fail. Okay? God will bless the plans that you have gone through. But ultimately, we know that God's purpose will prevail. So, why did God bring you here today? To inspire you to have vision and to do something about the vision, irrespective in what area of your life. With your spouse, with your work, with your family, with your garden, with whatever it is. May you go for it. May you plan, and may you then do something about it. So I want to encourage you. May we not just be people of vision. May we not just say, I want this to one day happen through my life. May we pray about it. Ask God, and when the right time is, say, right, Lord, who do I involve in this? If there's someone to be involved in, who do I go to? Where do I get wisdom? And then to do something about it. Amen? If you want to change your situation, you need to change what you're doing. It cannot just change of its own. And I pray that we, all of us, would have new vision and new insight so that we can be what God has called us to be. A victorious church, not a broken church, not a church that is crippled. God wants us to be victorious. Amen?